Good evening. Get a hymnal and turn it to 142. There is a fountain. We'll sing first, second, and last verse. Let's stand and sing. There is a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins, and sinners plunged beneath that flood lose all their guilty stain, lose all their guilty stains, lose all their guilty stains. And sinners plunged beneath that flood lose all their guilty stains. The dying thief rejoiced to see that fountain in his day. And there may I, though vile as he, wash all my sins away. Wash all my sins away. Wash all my sins away. And there may I, though vile as he, wash all my sins away. Last verse. Their sins by faith I saw the stream, thy flowing wounds supply. Redeeming love has been my theme, and shall be till I die, and shall be till I die, and shall be till I die. Redeeming love has been my theme, and shall be till I die. Amen. You may be seated.
Good evening. Good to see everyone out tonight. Doug, would you open with some prayer, please?
Our gracious Father, we just thank you for the many ways you bestowed upon us today, Lord, for the great Wednesday today, Lord, that, Lord, these men need to step up, Lord, and put their hearts out there, and they want to work for you, and we just enjoyed every minute of it today, Father. Lord, we just come to you this evening and open hearts and wait to hear your word, Father, and just, as we say, hear from heaven. Lord, we just ask for your blessings upon this meeting tonight. Brother Jody as he brings it. And Father, may we always give you praise, honor, and glory for everything you do for us. May we never forget where we come from, and may we never forget where you want to take us to. Lord, we thank you and we praise you tonight for all things. In Jesus' precious name. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. As far as announcements are concerned tonight, Deacon's meeting will be tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. So mark that down. Wednesday, April the 9th at 10 o'clock, Yahoos will meet at the Dragon's Den. So if you want you a good breakfast. Then Wednesday night at 6 o'clock will be our regularly monthly business meeting. Then coming up next Sunday, we will be having a baptism. We'll be baptizing Sanja Byers, and so she's all excited about that. I don't know how many she's invited, 100 maybe, I don't ever how big the family is, that's.
She's got mom's phone book and started calling everyone.
So we'll probably have double what we had this morning, so that'll be good. Then Sunday after church next week, we'll the Easter egg hunt at Poplar Gap. Keep that in mind. That'll be from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. There will be food, okay, so hot dogs, as far as I know, drinks, and desserts, I think, are all going to be up there, and plenty of Easter eggs to hunt. So tell the kids to come and bring plenty of plastic bags, either Food City or Walmart plastic bags, because last year was about 10,000 eggs up there, and they filled bunches up, okay? So hopefully we'll have good weather. We'll just pray that we will. And if you haven't brought any Easter eggs, plastic Easter eggs with candy in it, please do so, okay? So we need some of those. Just bring them, set them out here in front, and we'll get them. As long as you bring them by next Sunday morning, I think we'll be okay. So if you can bring them before then, that'll be great too. Coming up on April the 18th, the week of Easter, on Friday, we will be having our Good Friday service. We'll be celebrating communion that evening, and that'll be at 6 o'clock. We'll have special music also. Of course, Easter will be on April the 20th, or Resurrection Sunday, as I like to call it. And so I think look forward for a great Sunday. Let me encourage all those who can on maybe even next Sunday, and especially on Easter, is that those who can park in the back and on the upper end up here, please do so, because we normally have a lot of guests on Easter, and that'll make room for them. So all those that can do that, that would be greatly appreciated. Then the ladies' outreach will be cooking on the 24th. That's where we deliver to the shut-ins, so keep that in mind as well. Vacation Bible School coming up June the 22nd through the 26th. So it'll be here before we know it, 2.5 months, and Vacation Bible School will be here. We've already picked out the theme, be making plans and asking people to sign up. So mark that down on your calendar and say, okay, I want to help in Vacation Bible School this year, okay? And because we're probably going to need plenty of help. Any other announcements that we need to make? All right, Bobby?
Get a hymnal and turn to 333, Leaning on the Everlasting Arms. Stand and sing. What a fellowship, what a joy divine, leaning on the everlasting arms. What a blessedness, what a peace in mind, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how sweet to walk in this pilgrim way, leaning on the everlasting arms. Oh, how bright the path grows from day to day, leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. What have I to dread? What have I to fear? Leaning on the everlasting arms. I have blessed peace with my Lord so near. Leaning on the everlasting arms. Leaning, leaning, safe and secure from all alarms. Leaning, leaning, leaning on the everlasting arms. Amen.
All right, before we get into our Bible study, we'll take some prayer requests and have prayer for those that we need to pray for. Is there those that you'd like to mention tonight? Pam's not doing, she's already on there, but pray for Pam Day. figure out the options anyway. Yep. All right, any others? Okay. Okay. Okay, remember Harold Mitchell. Also remember Jack Long, as he's still in rehab. He's hoping to get out soon, but okay, John Ramey. Okay. Tommy Compton. Okay, Tommy wasn't here this morning. And pray for Sandy. She wasn't feeling good this morning either. Who was it? Okay. Jackie Hurley? Okay. Had the other knee replaced. Okay, remember Nyla? Any others? Yeah, remember Iva. She's supposed to go back to the doctor this week, and hopefully they'll find out something. Sam Billiter? Okay. Okay, anyone else? Bobby, pray for us, please.
Heavenly Father, we just come to you just now. We mention names, a world where we come to you this time. We just open up our hearts and minds and think towards them. God, we just ask that you have mercy on them, comfort them during their upcoming trials and tests and procedures. God, we know you're the great physician. You can cure them, and we just take this moment right now. Just ask that. Ask that you cure anything that might be wrong with them. Those who lost loved ones and the death, God, we know the morning, and we pray that you can be with them. Comfort them during this time of grief and what those families are. Maybe even use this situation to have them draw closer to you. God, you are the great and the Almighty, and we just thank you for all that you do for us. We ask that you continue to watch over this church, watch over all the activities that goes on in our church. God, just be with Joey, that she brings the message. God, we ask this as we do these things in our church, that we may even reach out to someone that doesn't know Christ as your Lord and Savior. Something we do, something we say, may draw them close. And God, we just thank you for all these things. Pray these things in Christ's name.
Yeah. All right, if you've got your Bibles, go ahead and turn to Daniel chapter 4. Daniel chapter 4. It's the last time we really see King Nebuchadnezzar. As we get into this week's lesson, let's remember, let's go back and review chapter 2 for just a little bit, because all this plays into chapter 4 a little bit. Chapter 2, remember King Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and the dream was a big metallic image. And he was the head of gold, and then had the Medes and the Persians, they were the silver, and then you had Alexander the Great, and the Grecian, they were the middle, the bronze, and then we had the Roman Empire, which was the iron and the clay together. And of course, I guess when Daniel interpreted the dream, then we know that at least for a little bit, King Nebuchadnezzar gave at least a token praise and honor to Daniel's God, the one true God. Then if you remember, we went to chapter 3, and King Nebuchadnezzar built him a great big image, 90 feet by 9 feet. Okay, 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. Is probably gold-plated. And, of course, he wanted everybody to come and worship him. And when Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego did not do that, then he cast them into the fiery furnace. We know that there was a fourth man in the fire with them, which was probably Jesus. We know that they came out of the fire with not even the smell of smoke on them. And again, King Nebuchadnezzar said there was no other God like the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. There was probably maybe 20 years difference between the first dream and then when King Nebuchadnezzar built his big statue. We probably go another 20 to 30 years now. And we come to the last dream of King Nebuchadnezzar. The first dream, it tells us in chapter 2 that when he had this dream, he was on his bed and he couldn't sleep. And it says he was troubled, okay? Because he didn't understand the dream that God was giving him. We know that God gave him the dream. God was showing him because King Nebuchadnezzar was concerned about his kingdom and what was going to happen to it. And so God was revealing through him and the dream that he gave him about what was going to happen to his kingdom and some other kingdoms, and then the final kingdom, okay, when Christ comes back and sets up his 1,000-year millennial reign. We know that he was troubled when he had those dreams. Then when we come tonight, we see the second dream of King Nebuchadnezzar. Again, God is going to show him about his kingdom, okay? This is about the pride of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, when you think about it, of course, King Nebuchadnezzar, he probably had a temper. A lot of the rulers, even today, are somewhat, we'll find out that God puts in the lowest or the basest of men in those positions, okay? We can look around the world today and we know that's taking place all over the world, okay? Here was King Nebuchadnezzar, and so he was, some things that he did, and we'll talk about those here in just a second. But when we open this chapter, have you ever read a book where they tell you the ending, sort of, and then maybe in the first chapter, and then the second chapters to the end of the book, how they got to there, okay? So this is what we see tonight. This is King Nebuchadnezzar really is the one that writes this. It's an official autobiography of him. It's a document that he wrote. This is what he writes to his kingdom, okay? And he prepared this document and sent it to every place in his kingdom, okay, throughout his vast kingdom. We know that they had captured several other countries. They had absorbed them into their country. They were a country that was mixed. They had several different nationalities there. They had several different cultures that lived in this country. And so what was amazing about Nebuchadnezzar is that we know the pride that Nebuchadnezzar had before. And we see the pride of King Nebuchadnezzar again. And so God is going to deal with that, okay? Because we know that when we saw the big statue that he built for people to worship, that he had a pride problem. It was all about him, okay? And so God really didn't do anything to bring him down from that yet. And so here we see, as we open that, we begin in verse number 1, we see some things here in the first 3 verses, okay? Because King Nebuchadnezzar does some really remarkable things, some things that you would not expect King Nebuchadnezzar to do, okay? One of them we see there as we read these, that he openly admits his pride, okay? How many people really openly admit their pride? Probably not too many, okay? But there are some that do. He openly admits his temporary insanity. And we see here that he becomes temporarily insane. He will also admit his beastly behavior, okay? And then also that at the end of it, he gives glory to God. And I think we really see the true conversion of King Nebuchadnezzar. So let's start here in verse number 1. The one thing that we know about God is that he hates pride. Pride's what got Lucifer kicked out of heaven, and a third of the angels with him. If you look in the Bible, there's a lot of Bible characters that had pride, and what happened? God brought them down. God is one that truly hates pride. God does not want to take second place to anything or anybody, and he won't, okay? And so King Nebuchadnezzar was wanting all the glory for himself, and so we know that God is going to deal with this. How many of you have had to learn lessons the hard way? Okay? Yeah, we all have, right? That's the school of hard knocks, right? We've all been through them. And so we see that happen to King Nebuchadnezzar here. Proverbs 16:18 says, pride comes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. And we know that's true, okay? And we see it here in our study of chapter 4 tonight. So as we look at this, we see a development of King Nebuchadnezzar's faith. And so here the first 3 verses are part of his testimony, okay? And so let's look at those. It says, King Nebuchadnezzar the king, to all peoples, nations, and languages that dwell in all the earth, peace be multiplied to you. Now, for the first time probably in King Nebuchadnezzar's life, he has found true peace. Where does true peace come from? God, with a relationship with God, right? And so King Nebuchadnezzar has truly found real peace, okay? And so we see that he says, peace be multiplied to you. In other words, the peace that he found, that he gives witness to that, to all his kingdom, okay? And so then he goes on to verse number 2. He says, I thought it good to declare the signs and wonders that the Most High God has worked for me. The testimony of King Nebuchadnezzar, what God has done for him, okay? Just like on Sunday mornings, or even on Sunday nights, or whenever it is, that if somebody wants to give testimony, what's the testimony to be about? About what God has done for us, okay? And that's exactly what King Nebuchadnezzar is doing, what God has done for him. Verse 3 says, and how great are his signs, and how mighty his wonders. His kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and his dominion is from generation to generation. Now, King Nebuchadnezzar had to find that out the hard way, okay? If we were to look at the theme of the whole lesson of the book of Daniel, would be that the Most High is sovereign over the kingdoms of men and gives them to anyone he wishes and sets over them the lowest of men, okay? So we look at those. King Nebuchadnezzar had to find out the hard way. And so here we see, as we start in verse number 4, we see the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar, okay? And so God gives him a dream to communicate an important message to Nebuchadnezzar. That was the message that we just read. It's there. It's on the first page of your handout under number 1. And so he gives him a dream. Now, we know the first dream was about the great metallic image. The second dream is about and we know that Nebuchadnezzar was the head of gold in that first one, but now we see that the kingdom of Nebuchadnezzar, the kingdom of Babylon, is like a tree, okay? And so as we look, God is going to begin with that. So in verse number 4, we'll begin with the dream of King Nebuchadnezzar. Now, the one thing I want you to notice, and probably verses 4 through 10, is about the number of personal pronouns that King Nebuchadnezzar, easy for you to say, right? Nebuchadnezzar, all right, Nebuchadnezzar, and he uses all these personal pronouns, okay? Now, when we come to verse number 4, it says, I, Nebuchadnezzar, was at rest in my house and flourishing in my palace. Now understand, at this time, there was peace in Babylon. They had defeated all their enemies. King Nebuchadnezzar had built a lot of beautiful buildings, a lot of different things, that he sort of created within his kingdom, all right? And so we know they had all those things, so it was a time of peace. It was a time that he built a great nation, or at least he thought he built a great nation. But it was God actually building a nation using King Nebuchadnezzar to do that. And so, but it was a time of peace. So here was a time that King Nebuchadnezzar was in his palace, in his home. Things are going really good, and then all of a sudden, he has this dream. Verse number 5 says, I saw a dream which made me afraid. Now, the NIV says that he was terrified, okay? Because this was way different than the first dream. The first dream troubled him, but this one scared him to death, okay? Now, we see some different things that take place in this dream that didn't happen in the other dream. It says, so here it says, I saw a dream which had made me afraid, and the thoughts on my bed and the visions of my head troubled me, all right? So God is showing him this. He's going to show him his pride, okay? He's going to deal with King Nebuchadnezzar's pride. So verse number 6 says, therefore I issued a decree. All right, so there's those personal pronouns that we see. He said, I saw a dream that made me, and on my bed, and my head, and says in verse 6, therefore I issued a decree to bring in all the wise men of Babylon before me, that they might make known to me the interpretation of the dream. Now we know that he did that the other time, right? The other dream, who did he bring in first? All these soothsayers, the Chaldeans, the wise men that he had there. And so he brings all them in first. Is that his plan or is that God's plan? It's God's plan, right? Okay? Again, he's going to bewilder all of these wise men of King Nebuchadnezzar. And so he calls all of them in. God, again, what do we say? God is in the details.
God is in this story. God is going to do what he needs to do, okay? So all the details, remember that God is in control of all the details, all right? Even in our life. What does Romans 8:28 say? And we know that God causes all things to work together for good to those that love God, to those who are called according to his purpose, okay? What did he call King Nebuchadnezzar in the Bible? His servant, okay? He is going to use, he's going to work all things out in King Nebuchadnezzar's life to bring honor and glory to him, to God, okay? So we see that that's going to take place. So therefore he issued a decree, and all the wise men of Babylon to come before him so that they can interpret the dream for him. Then we come to verse number 7. Then the magicians, the astrologers, the Chaldeans, and the soothsayers came in, and I told them the dream. Now we know that's different from the first dream he had, right? What did he require of the first dream? They needed to tell him the dream and then interpret it, okay? Now this time's a little bit different. I don't know. It's probably been at least 40 years from the first dream he had to this dream, okay? And so he calls them in. He tells them the dream, but they did not make known to me its interpretation, okay? So we see there's a little bit difference in the way that King Nebuchadnezzar approaches this dream, all right? So verse number 8 says, but at last, okay, finally, Daniel came before me. His name is Belteshazzar, according to the name of my God, which means Baal. Baal has something to do with his god Baal, okay? We saw that in the first chapter 1. And so notice, too, that in verse number 8, he calls Daniel by two names. He calls him by Daniel, which is his given name, and then Belteshazzar, which is the name that he gave him, okay? Now, if you were to read some commentaries on that, it may say, King Nebuchadnezzar loved Daniel, I think. Daniel was probably like a son to him, maybe. The one thing about Daniel, he knew he could trust Daniel. And so we see sort of a relationship here by interchanging his name. Daniel, Belteshazzar, whatever. And so, of course, the Belteshazzar is the name given to him according to his God. In him is the spirit of the holy God, and I told the dream before him, saying, Belteshazzar, chief of the magicians, because I know that the spirit of the holy God is in you, and no secrets troubles you, explain to me the visions of my dream that I have seen and its interpretation. These were the visions of my head while on my bed. I was looking, and behold, a tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great. Now we know the tree is a picture of the nation of Babylon, okay? It's King Nebuchadnezzar's nation. This is what the tree represents, okay? A lot of times in the Bible, the tree represents nations, okay? And so here it was that it was the nation of Babylon. A tree in the midst of the earth, and its height was great, which means it was huge, okay? So we know that Babylon was it was the ruler of the world at that time. And Nebuchadnezzar was the ruler over that at that time, and it was a mighty nation, okay? Verse 11 says, we see the vastness in verses 11 and 12. It talks how big about that kingdom was. It says the tree grew and became strong, okay? So one thing that we do know is that as Babylon captured other countries, that they would grow. They would bring more people in. As they captured those, they would bring them in. And because you have all these different ones, and it may have grown economically and everything else as well. The tree grew and became strong. Its height reached to the heavens, and it could be seen to the ends of all the earth. Now, in verses 11 and 12, we're going to see the word all 3 different times. And it talks about everything, all, okay, in the ends of all the earth. It could be seen everywhere upon the earth. In other words, it was that big, okay? And so then in verse number 12 says, its leaves were lovely, its fruit abundant, and in it was food for all, okay? That was for all the nations, for everything, all the animals and all those things like that. They had plenty of food, okay? In other words, God had truly blessed the nation of Babylon. And then the beasts of the field found shade under it. The birds of the heavens dwelt in its branches, and all flesh was fed from it. Now, when we see, when it mentions beast and it mentions birds here, that those are representatives of the different people or the different nations that were under the rule of King Nebuchadnezzar. We know that they had captured Assyria, I think probably Egypt. We know that Israel and Judah were now under under the authority of King Nebuchadnezzar. He had captured them and several other countries that were there. And so we see that the vastness of that kingdom. And it talks about how big the tree is. It uses a tree to describe how big it is. Then we come to verse 13. I saw in the visions of my head while on my bed, and there was a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. Now, when we look at that word, a watcher and a holy one, what do you think about? What do you think it would be? Huh? An angel? And it probably was. It was an angel of God. Now, one of the things, especially if you were when we get into chapter 10, we're going to see that there is this, the principalities of the air. There's a war going on, a spiritual war that we can't see, but God reveals some of it to us. God has his angels. Satan has his demons. We know that Satan has his own army, and we know that in chapter 10 when it talks about Michael was trying to come to answer a prayer of Daniel, that he was withheld like 3 weeks before he could come because of the princes of two of the different countries that had probably that Satan had control of. And so we hear when we think about this holy one and the watcher, it's a servant of God who controls, that God allows to control the rise and fall of nations, okay? So God has those angels that were there, okay? And so there's this battle going on that we can't see, a spiritual battle that's taking place. Do you think there is a battle going on for the United States right now? Absolutely. By the way, Michael is the archangel. Which country is he the angel over? The nation of Israel. Okay? That's the one that he's in charge of. God has put him in control. Okay? And so we see those things taking place. And here it doesn't give a name, but we see that it's a singular. It says a watcher. And it says a holy one. Now, in a few verses, we're going to see more than one. We'll see watchers and holy ones, okay? So here we see one that he saw in his vision, in his head, a watcher, a holy one, coming down from heaven. So we know that this is an angel from God, okay? And so he has a message, and he has authority from God to what he needs to do. And so in verse 14 it says that he cried aloud and said thus, chop down the tree and cut off its branches, strip off the leaves and scatter its fruit, let the beasts get out from under it and the birds from its branches. Okay? So when it means chop it down, what's he talking about? It's talking about the disgrace of King Nebuchadnezzar. Okay? And so we will see that he will be removed from his throne for a certain period of time. So he says, chop it down, okay, and cut off its branches, strip off its leaves. In other words, all the fruit, Nebuchadnezzar will not be in control of this anymore. scatter its fruit, let the beast get out from under it, and the birds from its branches. In other words, King Nebuchadnezzar will not be in control for a certain amount of time. Then we come to verse number 15. But he tells the watcher or the Holy One, gives us something about he's not going to destroy the nation of Babylon, okay? There is a purpose for it. Also, when we look at that, look in verse 15 a minute. It says, nevertheless, leave the stump, okay? So we know that the tree was what? It was the nation of Babylon, okay? And it was where King Nebuchadnezzar was the king. He was the ruler over all of Babylon. And so he says, cut the tree down, but leave the stump, which means what? That there is a purpose for that, right? That there was a nucleus that's still there. The kingdom is not going to be destroyed. It will still be in existence, but it will sprout later and begin to grow again, okay? And so we'll see that take place. But it says, he says, nevertheless, leave the stump and roots in the earth, bound with a band of iron and bronze. Okay? Now, what does that mean? In other words, where it was bound with a band of iron and bronze, that it's a guarantee that God is going to protect what's left of the kingdom until what time King Nebuchadnezzar has completed his part in the dream. In other words, till God has dealt with him. And it's going to give us a time that God's going to deal with him, okay? And so we know that God is going to restore the kingdom back to King Nebuchadnezzar after he recognizes the one true God, okay? And so God is going to use this. Now, when you think about this for a minute, what was God's plan in the Old Testament to tell the world about himself? What was God's plan? How was the world supposed to know about the one true God? Well, that was the nation of Israel. That was God's plan, okay? God's plan was, okay, you are my people. You are to tell the world about me. You're not to have anything to do with the world, but you're to go and tell the world all about me. So, but what did they do? They didn't do that, did they? No, they became and they married into different countries, cultures, religions, and all this stuff like that. They did not carry out what God wanted them to do. So here we see that God is going to do something differently, okay? And so he's using this to bring King Nebuchadnezzar. The nation of Israel didn't do that, but in one sense, God is going to use Daniel to bring King Nebuchadnezzar to a personal relationship with God himself, okay? And so what's going to take place to King Nebuchadnezzar? Well, first of all, the tree's going to be cut down, so he's going to lose control of the kingdom for a certain amount of time. He'll tell us here in just a minute. He says, but leave the stump and the roots and bind it with iron and bronze. In other words, God's going to protect it so that sometime down the road, in a few years, that King Nebuchadnezzar will be restored back to the ruler of Babylon. In the tender grass of the field, it says, okay, let it be bound in the tender grass of the field. Let it be wet with the dew of heaven, and let him graze with the beast on the grass of the earth. So here we see what's going to take place to King Nebuchadnezzar. He loses his kingdom, although God is going to seal it and keep it for him, but Nebuchadnezzar is going to have to pay a price for it, okay? And so what's going to happen to him? Well, he's going to be given look at verse 16. It says, let his heart be changed from that of a man. Let him be given the heart of the beast, and let 7 times pass over him, okay? So what's going to take place is this, that King Nebuchadnezzar is going to become a beast, okay? In other words, he's going to take on the personality. He's going to take on all the traits of a donkey or a beast of such. He will go out. He will eat grass with the beast. He will stay out in the dew. His fingernails and toenails are going to grow to be like claws and things like that. It'll be covered in with dew, okay? And then it says that let him graze with the beast on the earth, grass of the earth, okay? So so he actually takes on the heart of a beast, okay? So he is out there, and it says, notice in verse number 7, verse 16 says, and let 7 times pass over him. Now, what does that mean? 7 means, what's it talking about? When it says 7 times. 7 years, okay? Now, when we think about that, what does the number 7 mean? Biblically, spiritually, what does number 7 mean? Huh? Completeness, all right? In other words, we see it can mean several things. Completeness, spiritual awakening, inner wisdom, or divine protection. So we see a fullness as a time that it's going to take 7 years for King Nebuchadnezzar's punishment to take place, to be completed, okay? And so we see the number 7 a lot in the Bible. So it's going to take us 7 years. King Nebuchadnezzar is going to live that way. How would you like to live that way? How would you like to go out and eat grass, okay? How humbling would that be to you, okay? To have to go out there and live in the grass and well, that's what was happening to King Nebuchadnezzar, okay? Now, what is the purpose of that? All right, we see in verse 17 that we see what God's decree is, okay? Now, if we went back to verse 6, it says, therefore I issued a decree. King Nebuchadnezzar issued a decree. When we come to verse number 17, then we see a decree from God, okay? And look at what it says. This decision, in other words, what verses 15 through 16 was talking about, this decision is by the decree of the watchers. In other words, it's what God has determined, okay, to be the punishment for King Nebuchadnezzar. And the sentence by the word of the holy ones. Now notice we see plural for watchers and holy ones, okay? So these are going to be the ones. You remember when we read in Revelation that angels were used to bring on a lot of the judgments, okay? And we saw that take place. And here we see that God is going to use the angels again to bring judgment on King Nebuchadnezzar, all right? So here now it goes from one to actually there's more than one now, okay? Now, why does it say? It says, this decision is by the decree of the watchers and the sentence by the word of the holy ones in order. There's a purpose for that. In order that the living, not just King Nebuchadnezzar. This is written for who? This is written for all of us, okay? It's written for the nation of Israel. It's written for the Gentiles as well. It says, in order that the living may know. In other words, everyone in every generation from here on down needs to understand the purpose. That the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, okay? That all the living everywhere need to understand that. You know, when you think about it, how many people think, or how many of the rulers think that they're there because of them, okay? Because they have the authority, they, work their way there or whatever. Well, they're only there because God has allowed it, all right? So, 3 things it tells here that we learn. That the Most High God rules in the kingdom of men. Secondly, it gives it to whomever he will, okay? So we look around the world today and we see the rulers and the presidents of the world changes, right? They could have different elections. They could have people come in and overthrow the government that's there, and then another government set up and whatever. Is God allowing that? Yes, God is allowing that, okay? Can God take even evil men and use them for good? Absolutely. Evil nations, he can use them to accomplish his purpose. He was doing it right here, okay? So it says, and gives it to whomever he will, and sets over it the lowest of men. So In other words, the purpose of this and the reason for this is so that we can understand just as well that God is the one that's in control. Understand that God is a sovereign God. Now, there's a lot of people who have a problem with the sovereignty of God, okay? But God is sovereign. God will do what he wants to do. Does he need anybody? No, absolutely not. The thing about God is that we can praise him about is that he is a holy God. He is going to do what's right. He's always going to do what's the best. He has a plan, that his plan is always right and it's always best, and it will be accomplished, okay? One of the things that we know of the themes of this book is that God either rules or he overrules, okay? So we see that take place, okay? That God is either allowed to rule. If you look in the nation of Israel, in my daily Bible reading, I've got one of those chronological Bibles that is broken down into chronology of the, when it was written, why it was written, all these things, and it may have one book of the Bible here, and then it may take another book out of something else that goes along with it. But I've just been reading in the book of Judges, okay? And when you go through the book of Judges and you start reading it, how many different judges were in Israel that were allowed to rule Israel? Okay? And it's hard to say how many. Some ruled 20 years, some 30 years, some 40 years, some 80 years. And we see that who put those people in there to rule? God did, okay? Or he allowed those people to be put in there. Were there some who were evil? Yes, okay? You can see that. You can read that in there. It tells that they were evil. They turned against God, okay? And so God judges them, and he gets somebody else in there. So here we see that taking place, that we need to understand that God is sovereign God, and he is in control. That's why you and I don't need to be afraid of anything, right? God is in control of the economy. He's in control of the weather. He's in control of all the nations of all the world and the rulers of all the world. And God will accomplish his purpose. Does that mean that we will not suffer? Absolutely not, okay? God has a plan. Matter of fact, Paul writes that what? That that we will receive glory in heaven because of our suffering for Christ while we're here upon this earth, okay? So God uses those things, even the bad things in our lives, that he uses them, what? To build our faith, to grow us into the person that God wants us to be so that we will trust him. Okay? That's the thing. We will trust him. What happens when we don't put our faith in God and we think we can do it ourselves? What's that called? Pride. Okay? Pride. That's what Nebuchadnezzar thought, right? God hates pride, all right? Remember that. So don't get too proud, or God will bring us down, right? So we don't want to do that. And so, but we want to know know for certain that God is in control of all things, okay? So we don't have to worry about nuclear wars. We don't have to. God's in control, okay? Do we have to worry about one of the asteroids or the stars coming in and destroying the earth? No. God said it's not going to end that way, okay? So, God is in control. We need to understand that, okay? So let's go to verse 18, and we'll quit because this is the dream. This dream I, King Nebuchadnezzar, have seen. Now you, Belteshazzar, declare its interpretation, since all the wise men of my kingdom are not able to make known to me the interpretation. But you are able, for the Spirit of the Holy God is in you. Okay? So here we see that, God gives this dream for a lesson to all the living that's on the earth. We all need to learn from this, okay? And so then we come to verse 19, and Lord willing, we'll start there next week, and we will see the interpretation of the dream. Okay? So that'll be on 4/13/25. All right. Does anybody have any questions, any comments? All right. Jesse, will you dismiss us, please?